The great doors of the conclave chamber opened slowly. Ambassador walked inside with her head held high. Behind her followed 12 other humans, all dressed in their finest diplomatic uniforms. They had traveled for 3 months to reach this place. The Grand Conclave Station floated in the darkness between stars, and it was here that the most powerful species in the galaxy made their decisions. Looked around the massive chamber. The walls were made of living crystal that glowed with soft blue light. The ceiling stretched so high that clouds actually formed near the top. Hundreds of alien diplomats sat in floating platforms arranged in a great circle. In the center was a single platform where visitors had to stand and speak. Humanity had been traveling among the stars for only 200 years. They had built colonies on 47 worlds. They had created ships that could cross the void between stars. They had fought battles and won them. But here, in this ancient place, they were still considered children. The eth speaker rose from his platform. He was a creature, tall and thin, with 4 arms and eyes that reflected light like black mirrors. His species had ruled their corner of the galaxy for 40,000 years. To him, humans were barely worth noticing. "The delegation from Earth may speak," he said. His voice buzzed and clicked, but the translator devices made his words clear. Stepped onto the central platform. It lifted her up so that all could see her. She was a small woman with gray hair and calm eyes. She had spent her whole life preparing for this moment. "Honored members of the Galactic Trade Compact," she began. "Humanity comes before you today not as beggars but as potential partners. We seek membership in the Compact. We offer our technology, our trade goods, and our friendship. In return, we ask only for what every species here enjoys: access to the roots, fair trading rights, and the mutual defense treaties that protect all member worlds." She paused and looked around the chamber. Most of the aliens were not even paying attention. Some were having their own conversations. Others were looking at data screens. Only a few of the smaller species seemed interested in what she had to say. The representative flickered with dim light. There were beings made of pure energy, ancient beyond measure. They had existed for 100,000 years. When they were bored, their light grew dim. Right now, their representative was barely glowing at all. The ambassador watched with cold reptilian eyes. His species had sent warships into human territory 5 years ago, claiming it was just a border patrol. The humans had destroyed those ships. They had never forgotten this embarrassment. The eth speaker made a sound that might have been laughter. "The human delegation speaks of partnership," he said. "But what does humanity truly have to offer? You are young. You are weak. You control a tiny corner of space that no one else wanted." Kept her voice steady. "We have proven ourselves capable. Our technology is different from yours, but it works. Our people are hard workers and fair traders. Many of the smaller species here already do business with us. We have." "You have nothing that we need," the ambassador interrupted. His voice was a deep rumble. "You are insects pretending to be giants. You should be grateful we allow you to exist at all." Felt anger rising in her chest, but she pushed it down. "We are not here to fight," she said. "We are here to find common ground." The representative finally spoke. Its voice was like music, but the words were cold. "The compact has existed for 12,000 years. We have seen species like yours come and go. You burn bright for a moment, then you fade. Why should we change our ways for creatures who will be forgotten in 1,000 years?" Before could respond, the eth speaker raised one of his 4 hands. "We have discussed this matter already," he announced. "The compact has a proposal for humanity." Felt hope rise in her heart. Perhaps they had listened after all. "Humanity will be granted provisional species status," the speaker continued. "This means you will surrender control of your outer colonies to compact supervision. You will pay a yearly tribute in resources, and you will accept guidance from senior species in all matters of importance. This arrangement will last for 500 years. After that time, we will consider your application again." the chamber filled with clicking and buzzing sounds. The elder races were laughing. Stared at the speaker. "You want us to become your servants," she said quietly. "We want to help you," the speaker replied. "You are too young to know what is best for yourselves. Accept our guidance, and perhaps one day you will be ready to sit among us as equals." "And if we refuse?" The ambassador showed his teeth. "Then you will remain in your little corner of space, alone and forgotten. Eventually, someone will decide your worlds would be better used by a more deserving species. These things happen." Opened her mouth to protest, but the Eth speaker had already turned away from her. He began speaking to the about grain tariffs and shipping routes. It was as if she had stopped existing, as if humanity had stopped existing. The insult was complete. It was deliberate. It was public. Every species in the chamber saw the most powerful beings in the galaxy treat humanity like dirt beneath their feet. Stood there for a long moment. The humans behind her waited in shocked silence. The smaller species watched with sad eyes. They knew this feeling. They had experienced it themselves many times. Then did something no one expected. She smiled. "Humanity came here seeking partners," she said loudly. The Eth speaker paused in his conversation. "We found only masters looking for servants. We withdraw our petition. Permanently." She turned and walked toward the door. Her delegation followed. Their footsteps echoed in the sudden silence. "You will regret this," the ambassador called after her. "You will come crawling back." Did not turn around. She did not respond. She simply walked out of the chamber and let the great doors close behind her. In the chamber, the elder races laughed again. They had seen young species throw tantrums before. It meant nothing. In a few years, the humans would return, desperate and broken, ready to accept whatever terms they were given. They were so very sure of this. Far away, aboard the carrier ship Indomitable, Admiral Wei received a message. He read her final recommendation carefully. Then he opened a file marked with the highest security clearance. Protocol Prometheus. He authorized it. And humanity began to prepare for what would come next. 6 months passed after the humans walked out of the conclave chamber. At first, no one in the Galactic Trade Compact noticed anything different. The elder races continued their business as they always had. The Eth traded their precious metals. The sold their energy crystals. The collected tribute from their subject worlds. Everything seemed normal. Then the reports started coming in. A Eth merchant prince named was the first to notice something wrong. His trading ships had been using human freighters to carry goods through the outer regions of the galaxy. These regions were dangerous, filled with radiation storms and unstable. Most species refused to fly there, but humans had been willing to take the risk for the right price. Now those human ships were gone. Sent messages to his human contacts. There was no reply. He sent scouts to find them. The scouts found nothing. The human ships had not been destroyed. They had simply vanished as if they had never existed at all. At first, thought this was just a small problem. He would find other ships to carry his goods. But when he tried to hire different species, he discovered an uncomfortable truth. No one else was willing to fly those routes, and those routes connected him to 12 different worlds that bought his products. Within 2 months, had lost half his business. He was not alone. Across the galaxy, similar problems were appearing. The elder races had never paid much attention to what humans actually did. Now they were forced to look, and what they found surprised them. Human engineers had been maintaining 30% of the beacons in the outer regions. These beacons were ancient machines that helped ships navigate through hyperspace. The Compact had built them thousands of years ago and then forgotten about them. The machines were old and always breaking down. The elder races considered it boring work to fix them, but humans had been doing it quietly for decades, earning small payments that the Compact barely noticed. Now those humans were gone, and the beacons were starting to fail. The first major route went dark 3 months after the walkout. Ships that tried to use it became lost in hyperspace. Some never returned. The compact sent engineers to fix the beacons, but their people did not know how. The technology was old and the knowledge had been lost long ago. The ETH speaker called an emergency meeting of the Compact Council. "This is a temporary problem," he announced. "We will learn to maintain our own equipment. We do not need humans for anything." But the problems kept growing. Human medical ships had been visiting the territories of minor species. These were species too small and poor to interest the elder races. Humans had treated their sick and taught them medicine. Now those medical ships were gone, and the minor species were suffering. Human traders had been the only ones willing to travel through the dangerous reach. This region connected a dozen small worlds to the rest of the galaxy. Without human traders, those worlds were cut off. They began to starve. Human explorers had been mapping unknown regions of space. They had been finding new routes that the elder races never knew existed. Now that knowledge was locked away somewhere in human territory. The minor species of the galaxy watched all of this very carefully. They had been humiliated by the Compact for thousands of years. They had been told they were too weak, too primitive, too unimportant to deserve respect. Now they saw that a young species had stood up to the elder races and walked away. Quietly, ambassadors from these minor species began making trips to human space. They traveled secretly, using back routes that the Compact did not monitor. When they returned, they said nothing about what they had seen, but they were smiling. The Dominion grew worried. They sent their best spies to infiltrate human territory. These were skilled agents who had destroyed governments and stolen the greatest secrets of 100 worlds. None of them returned. They tried to scan human space with their advanced sensors. These sensors could detect a single ship from 1,000 light-years away. They found nothing. Human space had become completely dark to them. The ETH speaker called another meeting. "The humans are hiding," he said. "This is what prey does when it is afraid. They are hoping we will forget about them. Eventually, they will run out of resources and come begging for our help." The other elder races agreed. This was the only explanation that made sense to them. Humans were small and weak. What else could they possibly be doing? Then, exactly 1 year after the walkout, a single human ship appeared at the edge of space. It came out of nowhere. One moment the space was empty. The next moment the ship was there. It was a small vessel, barely larger than a shuttle, that had never seen a ship with that design before. The ship broadcast a single message in all the languages of the Compact. The message said, "To the species of the galaxy who were told they do not matter, humanity is listening. We remember what it was like to be small." Then the ship vanished. It did not fly away. It did not enter hyperspace. It simply stopped existing as if it had never been there at all. They were terrified. They had never seen technology like this. They did not know it was possible. In the Compact Council chamber, there was no laughter this time. The elder races sat in uncomfortable silence. For the first time in 10,000 years, they did not know what was happening. The ETH speaker stared at the recording of the human ship. His black mirror eyes reflected the image over and over again. Deep in his ancient mind, a terrible thought was beginning to form. What if the humans had not been hiding? What if they had been building something? 2 years had passed since Ambassador walked out of the conclave chamber. In that time, the Galactic Trade Compact had watched its power slowly crumble. 3 major routes had failed completely. Dozens of worlds faced food shortages. The economy that had supported the elder races was falling apart. Then returned. She appeared in the conclave chamber without warning. The great doors opened, and she walked in as calmly as she had walked out 2 years before. But this time, she was not alone. Behind her came representatives of 34 different species. They walked in rows, filling the central platform until it could hold no more. The ETH speaker stared at the gathering. He recognized most of these species. They were there, the amphibian traders who had been mocked for their primitive ships. They were there, the bird-like explorers who had been access to compact star maps. There were a dozen other minor species, all of them carrying themselves with a dignity they had never shown before. But there were also 3 species the speaker had never seen. They were completely unknown to the compact. They came from regions of space that had never been explored. Smiled at the stunned faces of the elder races. "Allow me to introduce the Terran Coalition," she said. 34 species, united in common purpose. We are not here to ask for membership in your compact. We are here to inform you that the galaxy has changed. The ambassador slammed his fist against his platform. "This is a trick," he growled. "These minor species are nothing. They have no power, no technology, no military strength. You have gathered a collection of weaklings and called it an alliance." "Then let me show you what weaklings can do," replied. She raised her hand, and a holographic display filled the center of the chamber. It showed a map of the galaxy, but the map was different from anything the compact had ever seen. There were new routes marked in bright blue lines. These routes connected worlds in ways that bypassed compact territory entirely. "For the past 2 years, humanity has been building," explained. "We developed new technology that your scientists said was impossible. We found routes that your explorers never discovered. We created a trade network that does not need your permission to operate." The map zoomed in on various sections. It showed trading stations handling cargo from 100 worlds. It showed scout ships mapping new territories. It showed human shipyards producing vessels by the thousands. 40% of all galactic trade now flows through coalition routes, continued. Your economy is collapsing because you built it on the assumption that you would always control that assumption was wrong. The ETH speaker finally found his voice. "This is impossible," he said. "You could not have built all of this in 2 years. You do not have the resources." "We did not build it alone," replied. "Every species you dismissed helped us. Every species you exploited shared their knowledge with us. You spent thousands of years telling the galaxy that you were the only ones who mattered. You created a lot of enemies." The ambassador had heard enough. He stood and pointed with one clawed finger. "Words and holograms prove nothing," he declared. "I will show the galaxy what happens to those who challenge the Dominion." He pressed a control on his platform and sent a command to his fleet. 50 warships had been waiting just outside the conclave station. They had been placed there as a show of strength, a reminder of power. Now the ambassador ordered them to jump to human space and destroy the first human colony they found. Did not try to stop him, she simply waited. The fleet entered hyperspace. 3 hours later, they emerged at the edge of human territory. They found a single planet ahead of them, a small colony world with only a few million inhabitants. The commander prepared to begin the bombardment. Then the Prometheus fleet appeared. 200 human warships materialized around the fleet. They came from every direction at once. Their hulls were made of a strange black metal that absorbed sensor scans. Their weapons glowed with energy signatures that computers could not identify. The battle lasted 4 hours. It was not really a battle, it was a lesson. The human ships did not destroy the fleet. They disabled it. They targeted engines, weapons, and communication systems with surgical precision. Every shot hit exactly where it was aimed. They fought back with everything they had, but their weapons could not lock onto the human ships. The black metal hulls seemed to bend light and energy around them. When it was over, 50 warships drifted dead in space. Their crews were alive but helpless. Their ships would never fly again. A message was broadcast to every vessel. "We do not want your worlds. We do not want your submission. We want you to understand that we are not prey." Back in the conclave chamber, the ambassador received reports from his surviving commanders. His face went pale. His scales seemed to lose their color. For the first time in his life, he had no idea what to say. The ETH speaker looked at the holographic display, still showing the coalition's trade routes. He looked at the representatives of 34 species standing proudly beside Ambassador. He looked at the ambassador, sitting in shocked silence. Then he did something he had never done before. He asked to speak with a human in private. Agreed. She followed the speaker to a small chamber behind the main hall. There, away from the eyes of the galaxy, the ancient ETH finally spoke the truth. "We did not believe you were capable of this," he admitted. "We thought you were like all the other young species, loud and foolish and doomed to fail." Looked at him calmly. "You were wrong." "Yes," the speaker said. The words seemed to cause him physical pain. "We were wrong, we may have miscalculated." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "What do you want from us?" His answer was simple. "We want you to learn." The conclave chamber looked exactly the same as it had 2 years ago. The same crystal walls glowed with soft blue light. The same floating platforms circled the central speaking area. The same ancient species sat in their traditional positions of power. But everything had changed. The Galactic Trade Compact had formally requested negotiations with the Terran Coalition. This time, it was the elder races who came as petitioners. This time, it was humanity and their allies who held the power. Ambassador stood on the central platform. Around her stood representatives from every coalition species. The ambassador floated in his water-filled hover pod. The representative spread her wings proudly. Dozens of others stood beside them, all of them equal, all of them important. The ETH speaker rose to address the chamber. His movements were slower than before. He seemed older somehow, as if the events of the past months had aged him by centuries. "The Compact recognizes the Terran Coalition as a legitimate power," he announced. His voice was flat and tired. "We are prepared to discuss terms for peaceful coexistence." Nodded politely. "The Coalition appreciates the Compact's willingness to negotiate," she replied. "We have prepared a list of requirements for any future relationship between our peoples." She raised her hand, and a holographic document appeared in the center of the chamber. The text was written in every language of the Compact and the Coalition together. "First," began, "the Compact will formally recognize all Coalition member species as sovereign equals. Their territories will be respected. Their rights will be protected. They will never again be treated as lesser beings simply because they are young or small." The ETH speaker nodded slowly. This was expected. "Second," continued, "the Compact will pay reparations to every species that was exploited under the old system. For thousands of years, you took resources and labor from minor species without fair payment. That debt will be repaid." The representative flickered with agitation. "The amounts you are requesting would bankrupt half the Compact economies," they protested. "Then you will have to learn to live with less," replied calmly, "just as the species you exploited had to learn." "Third," she continued, "the governing council of the Compact will be restructured. Every species will have representation based on their population and contribution to the galactic community. The elder races will no longer hold automatic control." The ambassador, who had been sitting in humiliated silence since his fleet's defeat, finally spoke. "You ask us to destroy everything we have built," he growled. 10,000 years of tradition, 10,000 years of order. You want to tear it all down." Looked at him directly. "We want to build something better," she said. "Your order was built on the backs of species who had no voice. Your tradition was a tradition of exploitation. We are offering you a chance to be part of something new, something fair." "And if we refuse?" the demanded. Did not answer immediately. She simply gestured to the holographic display. The image changed to show the current state of galactic trade. Coalition routes were marked in bright blue. They covered nearly half the galaxy. Compact routes were marked in dim red. Many of them were failing. "You can refuse," said quietly. "That is your right, but look at what is happening. You are failing. Your economies are shrinking. The species you once controlled are joining the coalition every month. In 10 years, perhaps 20, the compact will be a memory. You can fight against the current or you can learn to swim with it." The chamber was silent. The elder races looked at each other, trying to find some response, some argument that would restore their pride. They found nothing. Then something unexpected happened. A young Eth named rose from his seat. He was barely 1,000 years old, which made him practically a child by Eth standards. His elders stared at him in shock. Young Eth did not speak in council without permission. "I support the coalition's terms," announced. His voice was clear and strong. "For too long we have confused age with wisdom. We have mistaken tradition for truth. The humans have shown us a different way, not through conquest but through cooperation, not through domination but through partnership." The Eth speaker tried to silence him, but other voices were rising throughout the chamber. Young were glowing brighter, adding their support. Even some warriors were nodding. They respected strength, and humanity had proven its strength. More importantly, humanity had shown mercy. The fleet had been defeated, not destroyed. Their crews had been allowed to live. This meant something to a warrior culture. The old order was breaking apart, not from outside attack but from within. Finally, the Eth speaker raised his hand for silence. The chamber slowly grew quiet. Every eye turned to the ancient being who had led the compact for longer than human civilization had existed. She stood calmly waiting. She had not threatened him. She had not insulted him. She had simply spoken the truth and let the truth do its work. "There is one more requirement," said softly. "A formal, public apology for the treatment of humanity, for the treatment of every species that was dismissed as lesser, for 10,000 years of cruelty dressed up as tradition." The speaker was silent for a long moment. An apology was a small thing, just words. But for a being who had never admitted error in 40,000 years, it was the hardest thing imaginable. He looked around the chamber one final time. He saw the young members of his own species looking at him with hope. He saw the minor species standing proudly for the first time. He saw a galaxy that had already moved beyond him. Slowly, painfully, the Eth speaker lowered himself in a bow. It was a gesture of respect that no founding member of the compact had ever made to a younger species. "We accept your terms," he said, "and we apologize." The chamber erupted in sound. Some species were cheering. Others were buzzing or clicking or singing in their own languages. The minor species were weeping with joy. Ambassador watched it all with quiet satisfaction. This was not the end. It was just the beginning. There would be hard work ahead, difficult negotiations, old wounds to heal. But for the first time in 10,000 years, the galaxy had a chance to become something better. And that chance had started with a single species that refused to kneel. 5 years had passed since Ambassador walked out of the conclave chamber. The old Galactic Trade Compact was gone, replaced by something new. They called it the Galactic Concord, and it was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The founding document of the Concord contained a single human phrase, translated into every known language. It said simply, "Every voice matters." Stood at a window in the rebuilt conclave station, looking out at the stars. So much had changed. She was no longer an ambassador. The Concord had created a new position, a rotating speaker who would represent all species equally, had been chosen as the first to hold this title, not because humanity was special, but because humanity had insisted that no species should be special. Behind her, the great chamber was being prepared for an important ceremony. Representatives from 100 different species were taking their seats. Some were ancient and powerful. Others were small and new. All of them sat together as equals. The Eth had adapted faster than anyone expected. Young Eth philosophers had embraced the new order. They said that true wisdom was knowing when to change. The old speaker had retired to his, but the young one who had spoken up during the negotiations was now a respected leader. He brought new ideas to Eth culture, mixing ancient knowledge with fresh perspectives. They had discovered something wonderful. Human artists had begun working with them, creating works that blended energy and matter in beautiful ways. They had existed for 100,000 years, but they said they had never seen anything like these new creations. They glowed brighter than ever before, filled with an enthusiasm that surprised even themselves. They had found a new purpose. Under the Compact, they had been bullies, using their military power to frighten smaller species. Under the Conquered, they became protectors. Their warriors now served as peacekeepers, defending trade routes and protecting young species from pirates and raiders. It was honorable work, and it gave their martial traditions meaning again. But the greatest changes had happened to the minor species. They were now the biggest traders in 3 sectors. Their water-filled ships carried goods across the galaxy, and their merchants were respected everywhere they went. They had mapped more new territory in 5 years than the old Compact had mapped in 1,000. They found new resources, new worlds, and new species waiting to join the Conquered. Every month, more species applied for membership. They came from the far edges of the galaxy, from regions that had never been explored. They had heard the story of how humanity had stood up to the elder races. They had heard how the coalition had offered partnership instead of conquest, mercy instead of destruction. They wanted to be part of that story. Today's ceremony was for one such species. They had discovered faster-than-light travel only 10 years ago. They were small creatures, barely coming up to a human's waist. Their world had only 2 billion inhabitants. Under the old Compact, they would have faced centuries of what the elder races called guidance. They would have been treated as children, their resources taken, their culture ignored. Under the Conquered, they were welcomed as equals. Turned away from the window and took her place at the central platform. The chamber fell silent as she raised her hand. "Today we welcome a new member to the Galactic Conquered," she announced. "They have traveled far to be here. They bring with them the same courage that every young species carries, the courage to look at the stars and dream of what might be." The ambassador walked forward. She was a small figure, covered in soft brown fur, with large eyes that reflected the lights of the chamber. Her name was, and she was shaking slightly as she approached the platform. This was the biggest moment in her species' history. Smiled at her warmly. "Do not be afraid," she said softly. "You belong here." Climbed onto the platform and faced the assembled representatives of 100 worlds. Her voice was quiet, but it carried throughout the chamber. "For generations, my people looked at the stars and wondered if we were alone," she said. "When we first detected signals from other species, we were terrified. We had heard stories of what happened to young civilizations. We expected to be conquered or enslaved or destroyed." She paused and looked around at the faces watching her. Ancient Eth sat beside young. Glowing floated near grounded. Humans stood shoulder to shoulder with species from every corner of the galaxy. "Instead we found this," continued, "a galaxy where every voice matters, where the strong protect the weak instead of exploiting them, where being young does not mean being worthless." She wiped tears from her large eyes. "We are honored to join you." The chamber voted. Every single representative voted yes. They were now members of the Galactic Conquered. As the ceremony ended and the representatives began to file out, a young Eth diplomat approached. His name was, and he was barely 500 years old. "Speaker," he said respectfully, "may I ask you something?" Nodded, "Of course." Hesitated, as if gathering his courage. "When you walked out of this chamber 5 years ago," he said, "when you powers older than your entire species, were you afraid?" Looked at him for a long moment. She thought about that day. She remembered the laughter of the elder races. She remembered the certainty that she was doing the right thing, even though she had no idea if it would work. "I was terrified," she admitted. "We had no guarantee of success. We were gambling with the future of our entire species. Everything could have gone wrong." "Then why did you do it?" asked. Smiled. "Because we knew who we were," she said. "We would rather have died on our feet than lived on our knees. That is something the old powers never understood about us. It is not that humans are stronger or smarter than other species. It is that we refuse to accept injustice. We refuse to be broken. And when we see others being treated unfairly, we stand beside them." She looked out over the chamber, now mostly empty. Soon it would fill again with new debates, new challenges, new opportunities. The work of building a fair galaxy would never truly be finished. "The old compact believed that power came from domination," continued. "They thought the only way to be strong was to make others weak, but true strength comes from lifting others up. True power comes from standing together." Nodded slowly, understanding. Far across the galaxy, in schools and hive chambers and floating cities and undersea domes, the story was being told to new generations. It was the story of how a young species refused to bow, how they walked away from the negotiating table and built something better, how they offered their hand to every species that had been told they did not matter. It was the story of how the galaxy learned that age does not equal wisdom, and that the smallest voice can change everything. And in the rebuilt conclave chamber, now called the Hall of Equals, watched the stars and smiled. The universe was vast and old and full of wonders, and for the first time in 10,000 years, every species in the galaxy had an equal chance to explore it. This was what humanity had fought for. This was what they had won.